So sorry for that slight interruption. I didn't realize my mic was off. Audio is still good. I just checked. Going back to Kanye, height of his career with graduation. But despite this, tragedy struck. Going to a more serious note, after the success of graduation, Kanye, in more ways than one, was successful. But despite that, his long-term partner at the time, Alexis Pfeiffer, left him, and that really hurt Kanye. He had been with her throughout his success and wanted to stay with her. And even though Kanye for sure had wrongdoings in the relationship as well, her ending it really hurt him and put him in a dark place. And on top of that, to add on to that, Donda, his mother, passed not too soon after. Donda meant everything to Kanye, as she raised him practically by herself. Kanye even admitting that without his mom, there would have been no Kanye West, which shows just how essential Donda was to Kanye's success. Many consider Donda being the sole reason why Kanye stayed the lovable artist that everyone considered him as she helped him keep away from controversy and remain humble. Considering what happens to Kanye after the release of which album we're talking right now, 808s and Heartbreak, which is this one. This is most likely correct. All this strategy adding onto his already existing bipolar disorder, this caused Kanye to spiral out of control and act out in many occasions. Putting all that sad history behind us, 808s and Heartbreak, although it being made during Kanye's darkest time, is arguably one of the most, it contributed a lot to rap and hip hop. Rappers, for example, like Kid Cudi, Juice WRLD, Travis Scott, were largely inspired by this album because of its different beats. Kanye again stayed away from his soulful sampling that he was famous for at that point, and started using 808s and autotune way more. He actually very rarely raps on this album, and he sings a lot using autotune, of course, but he does sing and uses 808s for the most part. And there is a lot of mixed reception about this album, but it's still considered like a great album from Kanye. Moving on, having a mix of all, going back to like all the mental issues that Kanye had at the time. This all amounted to what his most famous controversial act is now, the VMA Taylor Swift incident. I doubt it requires much explanation. Most people will know what I mean by that, but I'll explain it real quick. Basically, when Taylor Swift had won the category for Best Music Video in the VMAs, she went up to get her award, and Kanye interrupted her by saying, "Hold on, I'm gonna let you finish." But Beyonce had one of the best music videos of all time. Later on, he even said that he hadn't even seen Taylor Swift's music video, so that was a bad move. Yep. Even having Barack Obama, the president at the time, say that Kanye West was an asshole for doing that. Excuse my language. So Kanye West went from being this loved idol by many to honestly the most hated man in the world at this point. He was hated so much, and with such a sudden change, he really didn't know how to deal with it, and this caused him to be at some point suicidal and having an unreleased song that addressed it, and it was his next darkest point in his life. But uh, he chose not to do that, you know, and instead decided to go to many different places and travel. He went to France first of all, and found peace there, even considering leaving the rap industry entirely. And that would have been the end for Kanye's music career, for all we have known, for all we know, like, you know, could have been the end. But he got inspired. He started having interviews and meetings with many other French artists, and they inspired him to make different kind of sounds, different kind of music. And after working with all of them, he goes to Hawaii and goes silent, completely silent. No one knows what he's doing over there. And out of nowhere, you just see all these artists like going away for a bit, going to Hawaii, around the same place that Kanye is. Of course, we don't know like where they went specifically, but we knew that they went to Hawaii. And this was like random artists, and almost back to back artists like Jay-Z, Kid Cudi, Drake, Nicki Minaj, even having actors at some point like Chris Rock, and singers like John Lennon and John Legend. Like, it's so many people, like a full catalog of celebrities and artists. And people kept wondering what's going on, like, super weird. And these curiosities were finally answered with the release of Kanye's fifth album, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. So, like how Nicki says, gather around, children, zip it, listen. Kanye drops My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and climbs up from the darkest depths of his own hell, and arises past every obstacle he had to as he had to deliver one of the best albums of all time to redeem himself. He revamps his sound for the third time now, and makes a powerful return to fame. This time embracing the fact that at this point in his career, he is the most cocky and stubborn he has ever been. And to him, he deserved this recognition, as there's no one that could really rival him and do what Kanye is doing. When making this album, Kanye invited such artists as previously mentioned, Jay-Z, Nicki Minaj, Chris Rock, John Legend, Elton John, and many more to participate in this album. He pulled out the best from each one of those artists, and if they did not reach his standards, he plainly told them that they would not be a part of this album. Knowing this, it makes sense that Kanye made the entire recording room of people wear suits when in the studio. Kanye was so dedicated to this project, he went as far as even having live orchestra to make the beats for many of his songs. Having Nicki Minaj narrate a story from the first song of this album, she marked the start of Kanye's beautiful, dark, twisted fantasy. Give me one moment here to gather my thoughts. Okay, let's do it. After the success of his last album, people really of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, people wondered, what else can this guy do? Like, okay, he rose to the ranks of like top dog again, but what can he do different now? It seems like he's done a lot of different sounds, and he hasn't really stuck to the same sound ever since his second album. He's now his fifth. So with his sixth album, Yeezus, he surprises a lot of people again, having a completely different sound. This being the album. For those wondering, the last album, sorry, they were out of order. Looks like this. This is My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and the one before that was Yeezus. This was a very controversial album, even among fans. Like, this was crazy. This was weird. The way that he completely had all these chaotic sounds. He had like screeching kind of, like it was not pleasant to hear. But that was the point of the album. Kanye was angry at many things in his life, and he wanted to show that with his album. So most of his album, besides the last song, were completely rageful. Rage at the society for racial problems that he had encountered throughout his life, and he finally showed them to the world. And some people debate whether last album or this album was when he was the most proud of himself, like cocky. And I believe that it was during this album, even combining his name with Jesus. That's, yeah, speaks for itself. But even though it was controversial at the time, a lot of Kanye fans now consider it to be even his best work. Like, re-listening to it, it is insane how good it is now compared to when it was released. The last song in that album strays away from that angry sound. The angry sound that he had throughout the album, and goes to a more love sound with Bound To, showing how he's now together with Kim Kardashian, and how even though he is the most rageful he is ever been in his life, Kim, his love at the time, made that easier for him, being the only love in his chaotic world. Soon after the release of his most controversial album, Kanye realizes he must change again, but instead of finding himself out beforehand and then making the album to where he is at the time, he says, you know what, I'm gonna do something different. He makes the album about the choice itself. That album is Life of Pablo. Throughout this album, he hints at many things that he cares about, and this references the title of the album, The Life of Pablo. References 3 different Pablos: Pablo Picasso, Pablo Escobar, and Saint Pablo. These 3 famous Pablos represent 3 different life routes that he can take. He can either choose to remain the same and be like Pablo Escobar and be sinful and act on that sin, or he can choose to concentrate on his Pablo Picasso part of him, his creative side, that focuses on his music and his clothes and his shoes, or that same Pablo side of him that will focus on his life on Christ and his family. So throughout the album, you can hear with the lyrics and the sound which song represents which. For example, with Saint Pablo, those songs that represent that lifestyle have obvious gospel elements to it to represent that side of him. And so does every other Pablo. And in the end, he chooses to commit his life to his Savior, Jesus Christ, and to fully pursue his creative side and not indulge on his sinful acts anymore. So he completely commits to his creative side, and this is obvious by 2018 Kanye. During 2018, he produced and released not only his 8th studio album, Ye, he also produced 3 other albums: Nasser by Nas, Daytona by Pusha T, and a joint album from Kanye West and Kid Cudi, Kid See Ghost. 4 albums in 1 year. That's insane. And these were all critically acclaimed. He produced all these albums. And he was his main album was critically acclaimed. So he produced and rapped and everything. And with his joint project with Kid Cudi was also considered Kid Cudi's best work. So he brought the best out of Cudi. and the best out of Pusha T, because that's also considered his second best, if not his best work to this day. So, yeah, that represents his creative side that he ended up choosing in the life of Pablo. And to represent his life to Christ, he makes Jesus his king. I have to admit, that is the one album I still have yet to listen to by Kanye West. It just doesn't interest me. I've heard mixed things about it still, and even though at least I've heard it's not a bad album, it's still okay. It's just okay. Like Kanye's worst album, which is Jesus is King, is still okay. Like it's not horrible, but people don't recommend listening to it if you don't want to. So I haven't. But that represents his start with Christ, his Christ life. This will then transition to Donda, his 10th and newest album, not including Donda 2. Donda is a tribute to his late mother, Donda, and he uses gospel elements again, just as how he did in Jesus is King, but makes him way more polished, way better, and gets a huge feature list like how he did in My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. And after that, he really showed that even though he limits himself to only gospel sounding music now, and not cursing at all throughout the entire album, even limiting others from cursing, he still makes one of the best albums. And people already consider this like top 7 Kanye albums, and that it'll continue to rise, because at first people didn't really like it. People like it now. The album is gonna age like fine wine, just as how Yeezus did. And with that, we have now addressed every single Kanye album. Kanye has 10 solo albums out right now, and is tied with Jay-Z for the rapper with the most Grammys ever. It's around 24 Grammys. But he tied with Jay-Z with 10 albums, and Jay-Z has 14. And Jay-Z has been here for longer. Like it's very impressive, to say the least. Seeing how every single album has inspired many, like Kid Cudi, Juice WRLD, Travis Scott, Drake, J. Cole, Jay-Z even. There is no argument to show that Kanye has no place in top 5, top 3, top 2. Kanye is the greatest artist of all time. And to say that he's not of all time, sorry, of our era. To say that he's not is just ignorant. His contribution, his production, and his rapping skill all show that Kanye is the best artist of our era. Thank you guys. Thank you for listening. First YouTube video. Not really used to it. Word from our sponsor real quick. Sempered. Sempered is a monthly cologne/perfume subscription. You get to plan out your subscription, whether you want 1, 2, or 3 colognes/perfumes a month, and they'll send it to you. Just in case you don't really want to commit to a cologne, you want to have daily scents, this is perfect for you. I use it all the time. Heavenly. This is Burberry London for Men. It's one of my favorites. I really like this scent. It's a more cinnamony winter/fall scent, and I recommend it to every one of my viewers that uses cologne. Final thoughts. Kanye's the best. What can I say? Room check. My PS4. Music. My bed. Go Raiders. They keep losing. And my Kanye flag. Thank you, everyone. Good day, mates.